UFP, the United Federation of Podcasts.
Welcome to Franchise Fatigue, the little podcast on the United Federation of Podcasts network, where two geek hosts talk about all the films in a franchise with all of their sequels and all of their remakes. I'm your host, Brandon-Shea, and joining me, as he always is my good friend, Zach Moore. How are you doing, my friend Zach?
So good to see you again, Brandon.
It's good to see you, too. You're looking a little bit ragged.
Yeah, you know, I think I look more badass with a beard.
You definitely don't look like that good with that suit on. Did that joke just fall flat?
That's correct. Moving on.
Okay. Well, here we are. We've made it. This is the last of the Mission Impossible movies. And it's been fun. It's been really cool. This is our first franchise, and we're all finished. We're going to talk about the last one tonight. There's going to be more coming, which is very, very exciting. But we've made it through 6 films, and it's been a blast. It's been a wild ride. It's been like as crazy as like an out of control helicopter. What do you think?
Yes, indeed. It's as crazy as doing a halo jump into what city were they in? Paris, Vienna. Sorry
Paris, yes.
Okay,
that was Paris.
But yeah, it's great that this franchise, spoilers, is still good after 6 films, and there's more coming. So this is a kind of a unique situation for us because I feel like a lot of the franchise we'll be covering are closed franchises. So even though this is our last episode on a film in the Mission Impossible series for now, we will be back, and that's a cool feeling to have more coming. And so Mission Impossible 7 is coming out in July of 2020, and then Mission Impossible 8 is coming out in August of 2021. So I'm very excited for those, and I don't know how they're going to top this one, but we'll get into it, won't we, Brandon?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I guess so. I mean, if you think we're going to be around for another 2 years. I mean,
like, personally, like, alive?
Well, not personally alive. You think we're still going to do this podcast in 2 years?
Well, I would hope so.
We might run out of franchises.
You're never going to run out of franchises. There's no more franchises these days you can shake a stick at. So
when we were planning our first year, we were like, we wanted to do every other week, and we're like, I just want to do this one and this one and this one, and we're like, well, that's 90 weeks worth of movies right there. We can't do that. And then I made the joke to you. I'm like, maybe we should do 2 episodes a week. And you're like, stop it, Brandon, stop it.
Absolutely not. I mean, one every other week. I know as a listener, you're like, oh, man, that's so far apart. But as a regular podcaster, as we both are pretty regular, heavy podcasters, this is it's required to have a nice podcast life balance. So every other week, I feel is what we can give for now. And every now and then we'll do a weekly, and we might sneak in an extra episode in between the weeks every now and then. But this has been going pretty well so far, so I'm enjoying it.
Yeah, I think so. I think we've been doing a pretty good job so far. It's been a lot of fun. But before we get into the discussion on this film, I'm going to make a good solid bet that you've got a dossier that you'd like to open that's full of wonderful mission-related trivia.
I do, and I have the cracked iPhone, not the pristine iPhone, so it's the real stuff. So getting into our trivia for Mission Impossible Fallout, this one is 2 hours and 27 minutes, almost 2.5 hours, so it is the longest Mission Impossible film so far, and actually the first one to be released in 3D.
I find that hard to believe because I watched Mission Impossible 2, and that was pretty long.
Yeah, well, yes, this is if they released the Woo cut, I think it would be even longer than this. But not only is this the longest Mission Impossible film, it's also the first one to be released in 3D. So I didn't see it in 3D, Brandon. Did you?
No, I don't think that I did, and I don't think I knew that it was released in 3D, because if I did, I would have gone and bought the 3D Blu-ray if I knew there was one, because I've got a 3D projector, and I did not buy the 3D Blu-ray, so now I'm disappointed in myself. I just have the regular Blu-ray.
So you're one of those 3D guys. You like 3D, huh?
It's fun.
Yeah, I am not. I usually go out of my way to not see movies in 3D when I can. But anyway, this one came 3 years after the previous film, Rogue Nation, so 2015 and 2018, which makes it the shortest gap between two films in the franchise. Isn't that crazy? Like, 3 years is the shortest gap. There have been 6 of these movies. You would think somewhere along the way they would have gotten to 2 or 3 years apart, but this was the quickest follow-up. And really, it's the first true sequel to the franchise as well. Yeah, there had been continuing characters and maybe a couple of continuing elements moving from one film to the next, but this one is the first true sequel in the franchise, carrying over villains and storylines and supporting characters and subplots from the previous film. So that is of note as well. But Christopher McQuarrie directed Rogue Nation. He returns to direct Fallout. He's the first director to direct more than one film in the franchise. He's going to go on to direct 4 films in the franchise since he's doing 7 and 8.
Yeah.
And McQuarrie, he actually provided the initial mission briefing voice, to Ethan when he gets his first dossier and turns it on there. So that is director Christopher McQuarrie's voice. And this movie does break the tradition of the even, odd Ethan Hunt short hair, long hair from the franchise. He has, his hair here is similar to what it was in Rogue Nation, so I guess they've settled into what Ethan Hunt's look will be. But speaking of Tom Cruise and his hair, he was actually, as we mentioned in the last one, in our Rogue Nation trivia last time, he was originally going to play Napoleon Solo in The Man from U.N.C.L.E. adaptation, but he dropped out due to scheduling with Rogue Nation. So Henry Cavill went up to play, moved up next in line to play Napoleon Solo, and then Tom Cruise, he saw the film and he was impressed by Henry Cavill, and he requested Christopher McQuarrie cast him in this film, and Christopher McQuarrie actually reached out to Henry Cavill on Instagram to be cast in the film, and that's how that went down. So it's interesting to see that these spy movie connections. It's weird that you look at a guy like Tom Cruise. He was going to be in Man from U.N.C.L.E. He was in this. He's been in Jack Reacher. Not that Jack Reacher's like some spy franchise, but it's a similar kind of deal. So it's interesting that he kind of gravitates towards these roles. So, and speaking of Henry Cavill, he was of course filming Justice League right before he filmed this Mission Impossible Fallout, and Justice League has some notorious behind the scenes stories and reshoots, and as you see in the film, he grew a pretty thick mustache, and then had some stubble as well. And it was part of his contract for Mission Impossible Fallout that he was not allowed to shave. And when he was called back to do reshoots for Justice League, it created kind of a problem. So Paramount and Warner Brothers kind of had some disagreements about this. So Paramount was willing to pay $3 million to add a digital mustache to Henry Cavill. But Paramount said no. They had it in the contract, and they shot it down. And that is why Superman has a weird CGI face in Justice League. So there you have it, folks.
That's funny. I've not seen it because I haven't seen any of those movies, but I've heard pray tell stories of the painted digital Superman face that look funny.
Well, literally the first shot of Justice League is Henry Cavill Superman with this weird CGI face. You're like, oh my God, but I don't blame. I would have done the same thing if I were Paramount. I'm like, you know what, guys, this is your problem. You should film your movie when you're supposed to, and this wouldn't have been a problem. So it is infamous, and it's there. And the sad thing is, had they been able to play ball with each other, I think it's a lot easier to add something in CGI than take it away. So it would have looked better in Mission Impossible Fallout to add the face to add the mustache to the face than taking it away in post-production in Justice League, as we saw. So moving down the list.
Based on what I've heard about Justice League, then it didn't do much to take away from the quality of that film. It was already pretty bad from what I've heard.
Well, that's its own discussion. We can. It'd be weird if we tackle films like that. It's like, because it's the DCEU. Like, do you do those? Do you do all the Batman, Superman films? We have to think about that when it comes time to do those kinds of movies. But moving on down the supporting character list, we have Rebecca Ferguson, who returns as Ilsa. And she was pregnant during the filming of this movie. And it took so long to film that she actually, by the time they wrapped filming, she was 7 months pregnant. Can you imagine that?
No way. So she's doing some of these stunts pregnant?
I would assume they filmed all the heavy action stuff first, but you never know. I mean, when Gal Gadot was also pregnant for the end of Wonder Woman as well, so it's really impressive what they can do with special effects now to hide that. And for actresses who are they're carrying the miracle of life and still performing these movies. So, but Simon Pegg.
It's a long way from Dr. Crusher and Dana Scully sitting behind the desk.
I was thinking about that too. I was thinking about the coats that they wear. Dr. Crusher's got her coat and Scully's like in the autopsy lab and stuff. Yeah, they have come a long way. I was thinking that too. But Simon Pegg, he got in shape, in so good shape. They started calling him Six-Pack Peggles because for the first time since his like 20s, he was in shape and he had a six-pack and he was quoted saying, "My wife appreciates it." So good for you, Scotty. And a supporting character who did not appear in the film was Jeremy Renner's Brant. Now there are a couple reasons why he did not return. He'd been in the previous two films. He was filming MCU films, Avengers. And also, because of that, he could have been in the film, but in a short scene. And if he was going to be included, he would have been at the beginning of the movie, and he would have died in the mission that gone bad at the beginning of the film. But he didn't want to just show up and get killed, so instead they just wrote him out, and that kind of leaves the door open for if they ever want to bring him back in a future movie. And I thought that's a wise choice because, as much as I say, like, oh, man, these characters who should have died, there should have been these characters in the last one, but like those are more minor characters. He was a pretty main character, and I liked the setup here because when we start talking about the movie, like when he shoots Luthor for a second, I was like, oh my god, they just killed Ving Rhames. I was like, whoa, but of course they didn't. But that was a good misdirect, and yes, so the door is open for him to come back. Now Solomon Lane is the first villain to appear in two films in the franchise because most of the other villains face very gruesome deaths at the end of each Mission Impossible film. So it's the first time. So returning director, we have returning main villain. So again, this is like a true sequel here. And speaking of returning characters here, Alec Baldwin was supposed to be the priest at the beginning of the movie in Ethan's dream about his marriage. But he was unavailable for filming, so they got Sean Harris, who plays Solomon Lane, for the scene. And the filmmakers actually thought it worked better, and I agree. I think the idea might have been they wanted to like have a fake out, like you thought, oh, maybe he's renewing his vows, with Julia and Alec Baldwin being the secretary is officiating their ceremony. That might have been what they were going for. But I like the whole nightmare aspect and how it's a recurring thing in the film. So that was just worked out based off schedule and ability. And also, finally, Wolf Blitzer, who is a CNN reporter, he plays himself in the film in the beginning, and he's done that in many other films, such as The Campaign and Skyfall. Oh, not is it Skyfall? Yes, Skyfall. And also, he's been in the House of Cards TV show as well as himself. Because it's always interesting to see. He's I don't know if you see CNN up there in Canada, Brandon, but
we do. We do know what that is. Yes,
but he's a. It's always interesting these movies because when you see actual like news people instead of just people they make up, it's just gotta add some weight, add some real worldness to it. And then some just general trivia about the film and action scenes itself. The bathroom fight, right? I would say the action showpiece of the film, but there's so many, and so it's hard to pick one that really stands out. That was meant to be shot in 4 days, right? 4 days on the schedule, but it ended up taking 4 weeks to shoot that one little sequence because it was so intricate.
Whoa.
Yeah. And Henry Cavill actually improv'd his arm reload moment, which has become like the most infamous gif for the whole movie, I think, where he does the reloading of the arms, and he improv'd that at the time. And then, some pretty major trivia that affected a lot of the film is Tom Cruise. He suffered an injury while jumping from one building to another in London when he's chasing after the helicopter. It's actually in the film, right? It's when he jumps from one building to the other. You see him hit the side of the building, and then he crosses and he tries to stumble off, and he did that even though he felt his ankle break basically because it was part for the script, and he tried to keep going. And I love that it's so Tom Cruise, like they leave it in the film, and it's a great moment there because you're like, damn, that must have hurt, and it really did. And that injury was supposed to have taken 9 months to heal. But Tom Cruise being Tom Cruise, it took him only 10 weeks to get back up to speed to get back to filming. So, And then one last bit of trivia here. I'm always curious about these in movies, right? When there's a countdown of some kind, sometimes I'll count down how much actual time takes place and versus the actual time they're showing us in the movie. And at the end